She lost her job for feeding a homeless woman every day. Until the night her Korean Mafia son knocked on her door looking for his mother. The November rain in Los Angeles wasn't the gentle kind. It was cold, relentless, the type that found every crack in your shoes and reminded you exactly how little separated you from the people sleeping under bus stops. Ivy Grayson stood behind the counter of Rosie's diner at 11:43 p.m., watching through the streaked window as the Korean woman huddled beneath the shelter across the street. She'd been there for 5 nights now, soaking wet, trembling, wearing what had once been an expensive silk blouse, now just another piece of the city's forgotten fabric. Most people walked past her. Some crossed to the other side. But Ivy saw something in the woman's face that made her chest tighten with recognition. Not defeat, but something worse. The quiet acceptance of someone who'd stopped expecting help. It was the same look her father had worn those final weeks on the streets, before the pneumonia took him, before Ivy had saved enough to bring him home. "Don't even think about it," Carol's voice cut through the kitchen noise. Her manager stood with arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Last time you gave away food, it came out of your paycheck. This time, it comes out of your job." But Ivy couldn't look away. The woman was shivering so hard her whole body shook. Her lips looked blue even from across the street. "Just tonight," Ivy said quietly, already wrapping leftover chicken soup and cornbread into a takeout container. "She looks like she's dying out there." "She's not your responsibility," Carol snapped. "None of them are." Ivy grabbed an old umbrella from the lost and found, pulled her jacket tight, and pushed through the door. The rain hit her immediately, soaking through her uniform before she'd crossed half the street. Up close, the woman looked worse, skin pale gray, clothes plastered to a frame so thin it hurt to see. Ivy knelt down, holding out the container and umbrella. "Ma'am, when's the last time you ate?" The woman's eyes snapped up, widening with something that looked like fear. She said something in Korean, rapid and desperate, shaking her head, trying to wave Ivy away. "I don't understand," Ivy said gently. "But I've got hot soup and bread. Please. You're freezing." The woman stared at the container. Ivy watched the exact moment her resolve broke. Watched her reach out with hands that trembled so badly she nearly dropped the food. Watched her eat like someone who hadn't tasted a real meal in weeks, maybe longer. When she finished, she looked at Ivy and spoke again in Korean, softer this time, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. "You're welcome," Ivy said, even though she had no idea what the woman had said. "I'm Ivy. I work right there." She pointed at the diner. "I'll bring you something tomorrow, okay? You just stay safe." She didn't expect the woman to still be there the next night. But she was. And the night after that. And the night after that. For 2 weeks, Ivy brought food every shift, soup, coffee, sometimes a dry pair of socks or a blanket from the thrift store. The woman never spoke English. Ivy never learned her name. But they developed something. A language of small gestures and careful smiles that said more than words could. "You know this is crazy, right?" Mara said one night, watching through the window. "She could be dangerous. Could be on drugs. She weighs maybe 90 pounds and can barely stand." Ivy shot back. "What's she going to do? Hurt me with harsh language I can't understand." But on the 15th night, the woman wasn't there. Ivy felt panic spike through her chest. She searched the surrounding blocks during her break, calling out uselessly to someone who couldn't answer. She found her 2 streets over, collapsed in an alley between dumpsters, barely conscious. This time, Ivy didn't hesitate. She called 911, rode in the ambulance, lied and said she was family, so they'd let her stay. And when the doctor said the woman had pneumonia, severe dehydration, and untreated diabetes, Ivy gave them her own information as the emergency contact. Because there was no one else. "This is insane," her best friend Shanice said when Ivy called her from the hospital at 6 a.m. "You don't even know this woman. She could have family. People could be looking for her. Then where are they?" Ivy's voice cracked with exhaustion and something deeper. "She's been on the street for weeks, Shanice. Sick and alone. If she had people, they would have found her by now. Or maybe she doesn't want to be found," Shanice said quietly. "Baby, I love your heart. You know I do." But you can't save your daddy by saving everybody else. Ivy wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Because maybe Shanice was right. Maybe this had nothing to do with the Korean woman, and everything to do with the man who died on these same streets 2 years ago, while Ivy worked double shifts trying to save enough to help him. The woman, the nurses just called her Jane Doe, stayed in the hospital for 3 days. Ivy stayed too, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, bringing Korean newspapers she couldn't read, sitting beside the bed like a vigil. When the woman finally woke up, really woke up, she saw Ivy and started crying. She reached out and grabbed Ivy's hand, holding it like a lifeline, saying something over and over in Korean that sounded like gratitude and apology mixed together. A Korean nurse passing by paused, listened, then translated. She says you're an angel. She says she doesn't deserve your kindness. Tell her everyone deserves kindness, Ivy said firmly. Tell her that. Before discharge, the woman pressed something into Ivy's palm, a small jade bracelet, worn smooth with age. She closed Ivy's fingers around it with surprising strength, speaking urgently in Korean. She wants you to have it, the nurse translated. It belonged to her mother. She says it's all she has left to give. 2 days later, when Ivy came back to visit, the woman was gone. Left in the night without a word. And Ivy was left with just a jade bracelet, a hospital bill she couldn't afford, and the hollow ache of someone who'd gotten attached to saving people who didn't want to be saved. What Ivy didn't know. 3 weeks later, someone would knock on her door at 10 a.m. A man with exhausted eyes and an expensive suit would stand in her doorway and say, "You have my mother's jade bracelet. I've been searching for her for a year." And everything, her sacrifice, her loss, her desperate need to save someone, anyone, would suddenly mean something she never expected. Before we continue, if you want to discover how this powerful story unfolds and what happens when a billionaire's world is shattered by one act of kindness, make sure to hit the subscribe button on this channel. Drop a comment telling us which country in the world you're watching from. Each view helps bring more transformative stories like this one to life. Ivy's life ran on a carefully calculated budget of hours and heartbreak. Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., she waited tables at Rosie's Diner, her feet aching in shoes held together with superglue. Saturdays and Sundays belonged to the boutique downtown, folding clothes for women who spent more on handbags than Ivy made in a month. Every 2 weeks, she sent $400 to her sister Kira at UC Berkeley, money that meant the difference between textbooks and dropping out. Her studio apartment in Koreatown was smaller than some people's closets. But it was hers. Or it had been her father's, until 2 years ago when the streets had claimed him permanently. She'd been working both jobs then too, saving frantically to get him into a shelter, into treatment, into somewhere safe. But pneumonia moved faster than minimum wage, and by the time she had enough, there was nothing left to save but guilt. That's why she noticed the woman at the bus stop. 5 nights in a row, the same slight Korean woman huddled beneath the shelter across from Rosie's Diner, soaked through and shivering. But it was the 6th night that changed everything. Ivy crossed the street during her break, carrying soup she'd paid for with her own money. Up close, she saw what she'd missed from the window. The woman's blouse wasn't just dirty. It was silk. Expensive silk, the kind Ivy folded at the boutique, now ruined by rain and street life. Her shoes, half buried in mud, had once been designer heels. This woman hadn't always been homeless. "Ma'am!" Ivy knelt down. The woman's skin burned with fever, her breathing shallow and wet. Pneumonia. Ivy knew that sound. The woman looked up with glassy eyes, speaking fevered Korean, trying to wave Ivy away even as she trembled violently. Ivy made a decision that would cost her everything. "You're coming with me." She half-carried, half-dragged the woman across the street. Carol's voice followed them. "Ivy, what the hell are you doing?" "Saving someone," Ivy called back, not stopping. "You walk out that door with her, you don't come back." Ivy didn't hesitate. She'd failed her father. She wouldn't fail again. The woman collapsed against her as they stumbled toward Ivy's apartment 3 blocks away, fever hot and fading. "Stay with me," Ivy whispered. Ivy's studio apartment had never felt smaller. The woman, she'd found a hospital bracelet in her pocket that read Unera, lay curled on Ivy's only bed, shaking with fever despite 3 blankets. At the 24-hour pharmacy, Ivy watched her bank account drain. $147 for antibiotics, fever reducers, electrolyte solution. Her rent money. Her grocery money. The emergency fund that wasn't supposed to be for emergencies like this. "You're sure these will work?" she asked the pharmacist. "If it's bacterial pneumonia, yes. But she really needs a doctor." Ivy couldn't afford a doctor. Could barely afford this. Back home, she crushed pills into applesauce, coaxed water between cracked lips, kept vigil through the night. By morning, Era's fever had broken slightly. By the 3rd day, her eyes cleared enough to focus on Ivy's face. "Gamsahamnida," Era whispered, reaching for Ivy's hand. They developed a language without words. Era would hum old Korean folk songs while Ivy cooked ramen on the hot plate. Ivy would show Era photos on her phone, her sister Kira's graduation, her father's smile, and Era would touch the screen gently, understanding loss without translation. On the 5th night, Era was strong enough to sit up. She gestured at Ivy's phone, miming music. Ivy pulled up a playlist, Old Soul, the kind her father used to play. Aretha Franklin filled the tiny space. Era closed her eyes, swaying slightly. When she opened them, tears tracked down her face. She pointed at Ivy, then at her own heart, then clasped her hands together. "You have a good heart." Ivy understood perfectly. They fell into rhythm. Ivy would leave for her weekend retail job, the only income she had left, and return to find Era had washed their 2 plates, folded the blankets, straightened the chaos into order. Small acts of gratitude from someone who had nothing. At night, they'd sit on the floor, sharing cup noodles and humming different songs that somehow harmonized. Era would pat Ivy's hand when she looked worried about bills. Ivy would brush Era's hair, careful of the tangles. The studio became a sanctuary. 2 women who'd lost everything, building something fragile and precious in 300 square feet. Ivy didn't know that in 2 days, someone would come looking. That her tiny sanctuary was about to collide with a world of marble and money. For now, there was just soup, music, and the quiet peace of not being alone. Jang Sung-chul hadn't slept properly in 367 days. His penthouse office overlooked downtown LA, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a city that had swallowed his mother without a trace. On his desk, 12 binders from private investigators, hundreds of dead-end leads, facial recognition reports that found everyone except the one person who mattered. "Mr. Jang." His assistant knocked softly. "Your 3 p.m. is waiting." "Cancel it." His voice was flat, exhausted. "Cancel everything." He'd built a tech empire by 28, revolutionized humanitarian AI, made Forbes 30 under 30. None of it meant anything. He'd trade every dollar, every achievement, every line of code for 5 minutes with his mother. The worst part was knowing he'd failed her before she even left. His father's death had shattered her. And Sung-chul, brilliant and emotionally stunted, had thrown money at the problem. Therapists she wouldn't talk to. Medication she wouldn't take. He'd been too busy, too important, too convinced that solutions came in the form of contracts and credentials. Until the morning she vanished, leaving only a note. "Don't look for me. I'm only causing you pain." A year of searching. A year of failure. His phone buzzed. His head of security. "We found something." Sung-chul's heart stopped. 20 minutes later, he stood in a surveillance room, staring at a grainy CCTV feed his bodyguard had pulled from a street camera near Koreatown. The timestamp read 11 days ago. There, a figure in a dark waitress uniform, supporting someone smaller, frielier. The quality was terrible, the angle worse. But Sung-chul would know his mother's silhouette anywhere. The way she moved even weakened. The tilt of her head. "Freeze it." "There." He pointed at the waitress. Young, black, determined expression visible even through the blur. "Who is she?" "Working on it. The uniform matches 3 diners in that radius. We're checking employee records now." "Faster." "Sir." "Faster." His composure cracked. "That's my mother. That woman has my mother." The security team exchanged glances. They'd never seen their boss like this, desperate, unraveling human. "We'll find her," his head of security promised. "By tomorrow we'll have a name and address." Sung-chul stared at the frozen frame. His mother, leaning against a stranger who'd chosen to help when her own son had failed. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. For the first time in a year, he had hope. And it terrified him more than the searching had. The knock came at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Not a friendly knock. A commanding one that made the thin door rattle in its frame. Ivy froze, spoon halfway to Era's mouth. They'd been having breakfast, instant oatmeal split between two bowls, the quiet morning ritual they'd fallen into. Era's eyes went wide with fear. The knock came again. Harder. "LAPD. Open the door." "No, not LAPD." The voice was too controlled, too expensive. Ivy moved to the door, positioning herself between it and Era. Through the peephole, her blood ran cold. For men in dark suits. Earpieces. The stance of people trained to hurt. And in the center, a man who looked like he owned the building, the block, maybe the entire city. Tall, impeccably dressed, face carved from stone and exhaustion. "I don't want any trouble," Ivy called through the door. "Then open it." The man's voice cracked slightly. "Please. I just need to see her." Behind Ivy, Era made a small, broken sound. The man must have heard it. "Yama." His composure shattered completely. "Yama." He moved forward. His security chief grabbed his arm, but he wrenched free, pressing against the door. "Please. I've been looking for a year. Please let me see my mother." Ivy's mind spun. "Mother?" This man in his $1,000 suit, surrounded by bodyguards. "You're lying," she said, but her voice wavered. Yunera. Born 1968 in Busan. Married Jang Minho in 1995. Moved to LA in 1997. His words tumbled out desperate, specific. "She has a scar on her left wrist from a bicycle accident when she was 12. She hums when she's nervous. Her favorite song is Ararang." Behind Ivy, Era was crying, saying something in Korean over and over. Ivy's hands shook as she unlocked the door. It swung open. Jang Sung-chul stood frozen, staring past Ivy to where his mother sat on the bed in borrowed clothes, thinner than he'd ever seen her, but alive. Breathing. "There. Yama," he whispered. Then his knees buckled. His security chief caught him as he collapsed forward, this man who commanded boardrooms, reduced to a sobbing son who'd finally found what he'd lost. Era opened her arms. And Sung-chul fell into them like a child, both of them weeping in a language that needed no translation. "I'm taking you both home." Sung-chul's voice was steady now, businessman restored. "My estate has a full medical staff, proper rooms." "No." Ivy stood her ground in her tiny apartment that suddenly felt even smaller with 4 bodyguards filling it. "She's still recovering. Moving her could." "Could what?" "Be worse than this." He gestured at the studio, the hot plate, the single bed, the bathroom door that didn't quite close. Not cruel, but matter of fact. "She needs proper care. She needs familiar." Ivy's voice sharpened. "She's been through trauma. You can't just uproot her because you have money." Their eyes locked. A battle of wills across 300 square feet. Era spoke softly in Korean. Sung-chul turned to her, and they conversed rapidly. Finally, he looked back at Ivy. "She wants you to come. She won't go without you." "I can't just, I have work, I have. I'll pay you. Whatever you need. Please." The corporate mask slipped. "I just got her back. I can't lose her again." That's how Ivy found herself in the back of a Mercedes an hour later, Era's hand clutched in hers, watching Koreatown disappear through tinted windows. The estate wasn't a home. It was a monument to loneliness. Marble floors that echoed with every footstep. Ceilings so high they swallowed sound. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens that no one walked through. Beautiful, expensive, and utterly cold. "Your room is down this hall," Sung-chul said, leading them past artwork that cost more than Ivy would make in a lifetime. "My mother's is next door. Medical staff is on call 24/7. Kitchen is. Where do you sleep?" Ivy interrupted. He paused. "The East Wing. How far is that?" "Far enough." Era's room was larger than Ivy's entire apartment. California king bed, private bathroom, sitting area. Era looked lost in it, smaller somehow. That night, Ivy found her curled in the corner of the massive bed, humming nervously. No instant oatmeal. No cramped warmth. Just expensive silence. "I know," Ivy whispered, climbing onto the bed beside her. "I don't belong here either." Era gripped her hand tight. Downstairs, Sung Chul stood alone in his pristine kitchen, staring at the security monitors. His mother was home. Safe. Alive. So why did his chest still ache with the fear of losing her? Sung Chul found them in the garden on the third morning. His mother sat on a stone bench, Ivy beside her, both of them laughing at something. Actually laughing, a sound he hadn't heard from his mother in over a year. Ivy was showing her phone photos of something. His mother pointed, said something in Korean. Ivy responded with exaggerated gestures that needed no translation. He'd hired the best therapists. Doctors. Specialists who'd written books on grief and trauma. None of them had made his mother laugh. "Your mother likes birds," Ivy said later, finding him in his office. "Did you know that?" He looked up from his laptop, caught off guard. "What?" "Birds. I was showing her pictures from the park." She got excited about the blue jays. Ivy leaned against the doorframe, comfortable in a way that shouldn't work in his sterile office, but somehow did. "She's been drawing them." Little sketches on the notepad in her room. Sung Chul had no idea his mother liked birds. Or drew. Or that she'd smile at blue jay photos. "What else?" he asked quietly. "She hums when she's content, not just nervous. She folds napkins into cranes when she thinks no one's watching. She takes her tea with honey, not sugar." Ivy's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "She's a person, not a problem to solve." The words hit like a physical blow. He'd spent a year searching for his mother. But had he ever really seen her? Or had she always been a case to manage, a responsibility, something to fix with the right resources? That evening, he watched from the doorway as Ivy taught his mother to make grilled cheese. Simple, ordinary, something his five-star chef would never prepare. They were singing badly to music from Ivy's phone. His mother was moving to the rhythm, spatula in hand, alive in a way no amount of money had achieved. Ivy glanced back, caught him watching. Their eyes met. She didn't smile, just held his gaze with something like understanding, like she saw straight through his expensive armor to the lonely son who'd failed the person he loved most. Sung Chul felt something crack open in his chest. He wasn't falling for her beauty or her sacrifice or her strength, though she had all three. He was falling for the way she saw people. Really saw them. The way she'd seen his mother as human when everyone else, including him, had seen brokenness. Ivy found him in the garden at midnight, sitting on the same bench where Era had laughed that morning. He looked smaller somehow, without the suit, without the entourage. Just a man staring at stars he probably never noticed. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He startled slightly. "I don't sleep much. Haven't in a year." She sat down, leaving space between them. The garden was quiet except for crickets and the distant hum of the city below. "My father built this place," Sung Chul said suddenly. "Every tree, every stone. He wanted to give my mother a piece of Korea. Something beautiful." He paused. "I never understood why she stopped coming out here after he died. Now I think, maybe it hurt too much. Remembering what she'd lost." Ivy stayed silent, sensing he needed to talk more than he needed answers. "I was 8 when we moved to LA. My father worked constantly. Built his company from nothing. My mother, she sacrificed everything. Her career, her family, her language." His voice roughened. "I learned English in 6 months. Became American. Left her behind without realizing it." "You were a child," Ivy said softly. "I was her son." He turned to face her, and in the moonlight, she saw tears tracking down his face. "By the time I was successful enough to give her everything, I'd forgotten how to give her anything. I'd hire therapists instead of sitting with her. Send her to spas instead of asking what she needed. I built her this palace and left her alone in it." Ivy's chest tightened with recognition. "You were trying to save her the only way you knew how. I threw money at grief. At loneliness." His laugh was bitter. A year searching with private investigators, helicopters, facial recognition. All that money and technology. And you found her by just seeing her. Being human to her. Ivy reached across the space between them, took his hand. His fingers closed around hers desperately. You're not your resources, Sung-chul. You're not your company or your money or your solutions. She squeezed gently. You're just a son who lost his father and didn't know how to reach his mother through the grief. That doesn't make you a failure. That makes you human. He broke then, shoulders shaking with sobs he'd been holding for a year. And Ivy held his hand in the dark, realizing he'd been starving too. Just for something money couldn't buy. Carol showed up at the estate gates on a Tuesday afternoon, all forced smiles and fake humility. Security called up to the house. A Carol Martinez here to see Ms. Grayson? Ivy met her at the front entrance, arms crossed. Ivy! God, this place is incredible. Carol's eyes swept over the marble, the fountain, the sheer wealth on display. I heard you'd landed on your feet. Or should I say, landed in gold. What do you want, Carol? Look, I'll cut to the chase. I made a mistake firing you. You were my best waitress. She smiled that manager smile, calculated and sincere. I want you back. Better shifts, better tips. Hell, I'll even throw in a raise. Ivy stared at her. 3 weeks ago, this would have been everything. Job security. Income. Independence. You fired me for feeding a sick woman. I was under pressure from corporate. You know how it is. Carol waved dismissively. But now that you're connected, dating a billionaire changes things. Having you back would be good for business. People love a Cinderella story. There it was. The real reason. I'm not a publicity stunt, Carol. Of course not. But come on, Ivy. You're smart. Use what you've got while you've got it. These relationships don't always last. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Rich men get bored. You need a backup plan. Ivy felt something crystallize inside her. For years, she'd defined herself by survival. By what she could earn, what she could sacrifice, how much she could endure alone. Accepting help felt like weakness. Letting someone care for her felt dangerous. But Sung-chul wasn't trying to buy her. He was trying to build something with her. No, Ivy said firmly. No. Ivy, be reasonable. I said no. I don't need your pity job. I don't need to be your diversity hire or your feel-good story. She straightened her shoulders. I'm building something real here. Not a transaction. Not a backup plan. A partnership. Carol's smile hardened. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was working for someone who couldn't see people as anything more than profit margins. As Carol left, Ivy turned to find Sung-chul standing in the doorway, having heard everything. His expression was unreadable. Then he smiled, real, vulnerable, grateful. Partnership? He asked softly. Partnership, Ivy confirmed. Equals. 6 months later, the dining room that had once echoed with emptiness now hummed with life. Ivy's sister Kira was home from Berkeley, laughing with Era over badly pronounced Korean phrases. Shanice sat beside Sung-chul's CFO, debating tech ethics with surprising passion. The long mahogany table, built to impress business partners who never came, now held mismatched dishes, homemade kimchi, collard greens, and Era's famous japchae alongside Ivy's cornbread. This is chaos, Sung-chul murmured, standing beside Ivy in the kitchen doorway. This is family, she corrected, squeezing his hand. Era caught sight of them and gestured emphatically. Ivy! Sung-chul! Sit! They took their seats, not at opposite ends like strangers, but together at the head of the table, Era between them. No longer a waitress serving others. No longer a billionaire dining alone. Just 3 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of loss. Speech, Kira called out, grinning. Come on, this is basically Thanksgiving. Sung-chul looked at Ivy. She nodded. He stood, clearing his throat. A year ago, I had everything and nothing. Money, success, and a hole in my life where my family should be. His voice steadied. I thought finding my mother would fill it. But Ivy taught me something more important. Era reached up, took his hand. She taught me that family isn't about blood or wealth or perfect solutions. It's about showing up. About seeing people, really seeing them. about sharing what you have, even when you have almost nothing. He looked at Ivy, eyes bright. She gave my mother soup when she had barely enough for herself. She gave me humanity when I'd forgotten what it looked like. Ivy's throat tightened. So this meal, Sungchul gestured at the chaotic, beautiful spread, this isn't just dinner. It's a promise that this table will always have room. That no one in this family will ever be hungry, for food, for love, for belonging, ever again. Era stood, pulling them both into a fierce embrace, saying something in Korean through happy tears. As they sat down to eat, Ivy caught Sungchul's eye across the jade bracelet on her wrist. He mouthed, "Thank you." She mouthed back, "We saved each other." And for the first time in years, the house felt like home. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that true wealth is measured in compassion, not currency. Drop a comment below. What moment moved you most? Was it Ivy's sacrifice at the diner, Sungchul breaking down in the garden, or Era's quiet return to life through simple acts of kindness? Your support helps us bring more stories of hope and humanity to life. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything.